Welcome to the podcast, Wait, What Do You Do Again? Where we talk to everyday people doing amazing things. I'm your host, Megan DeFord. Let's go. Welcome to the show. Today we have Christal Dimas, Associate Director of Scholarship Selection at a major public university, a social media creator, and mom to two adorable dogs. Thanks for being here, Christal.
Thank you for having me, Megan. I'm so excited.
Yeah, how's your day going?
It's going great. It's a very hot day, but it's summer, so I'm excited. Things are generally slower in the summer, so.
That's great. Yeah, it's hot everywhere. I walked out this morning and I don't know what I was expecting, but I was like, it's hot. I'm not drinking my coffee out here. So nice little reminder. So you have spent your entire career in higher education. What drew you to this field and what roles have you done in higher ed?
Yeah, I often say that I landed in higher ed on accident. I, like many 18, 19-year-olds, thought I was going to be a doctor. I had some very high hopes about being in the medical field, and I think we did some sort of lab in biology, I think my junior year in college, and we had to prick each other's fingers and test blood types, and it freaked me out so much, the thought of blood being near me, that I decided I wasn't doing that anymore. So I ended up doing an internship the summer after my junior year in Washington, D.C., and it was with like a Department of Public Health type thing. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to be near DC. And I had a really strong mentor in college, and I mentioned all of this to her, and she said, well, you don't have to leave college if you don't want to. You could work in admissions for a few years. You could do student affairs. There's so many jobs on college campuses. So I ended up applying to two different roles, one in my home city and then one very far away in Maryland. And I got both of them, and I made the decision to not stay, where I was, and to just go off. And so I landed in an admissions role. And I really loved the work that I was doing, but I kind of had this calling to work with first generation students. And the way that it was kind of sparked is that I was often asked to speak to parents and students who only spoke Spanish in the office when they would come by. And I said, these are the students that I want to work with. And being a first generation student myself, I kind of did some soul searching, and I was in admissions for a short time, and then decided to get my degree in public policy, my master's in public policy. That was really kind of a way to be flexible, because I was still like, maybe I'll go in the public health route, but if that doesn't work out, my degree is still very general. And after I finished my public policy degree, I ended up working for a TRIO program, which specifically targets first-generation low-income students. And that really brought me a lot of joy. I loved the work, but it was also terribly underfunded. And that kind of made me frustrated. And unfortunately, I had to make a decision where I was like, I think I need to move in a different direction, because it was causing me too much sadness. I'm deeply empathetic, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this type of work, especially when I wasn't seeing the resources that needed to go towards it being put into those programs.
And where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I then ended up in the College of Engineering, working for specifically a scholarship program. And it was a very small program. I got in right as they were just welcoming their first group of students who had just gotten this scholarship. So it was really exciting to build that. And what was really cool is that these students had need. So there was a need component to these awards. And if you're not familiar with the scholarship world, some scholarships are just merit-based, which means they only look at your grades and your activities and the things that you've accomplished. And there are other scholarships that are need-based, which is when you think about financial aid, and they're actually looking at your finances to determine what amount you get. And then there are the unicorns, which are both, which is really fun, because you get to see these really, really smart, super deserving students and it feels good to be able to say, whatever this next step in your process is, we're going to help you not only with like the soft skill part of it, but also money. There's money on the table. And that is, again, life changing for them. And it makes the difference between a student being able to just go to school and get an unpaid internship in engineering, just because that's, where I was, and then having to like spend 20 hours a week at I don't know, like a job that isn't going to help them further their career. Yeah, that's how I ended up in the scholarship world. I really loved engineering, and then I decided to leave.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I work with a merit scholarship, and I do all things what we call selection and onboarding. So I am reading students' applications, I'm watching interviews, I'm creating rubrics and evaluations to kind of help figure out who's going to get these, super prestigious awards. And then I'm also kind of holding their hand a little bit from the time they arrive on campus through that first semester. So I'm also able to teach like an introduction to college type class specifically for our scholarship students. And then they're on their own. And then I start over. I do it all over again every year. So that's what I do now, is just scholarship selection, scholarship onboarding.
That's amazing. The other thing that we have to talk about is you had this really interesting, not detour,
Yeah.
but scenario in where you were previously,
Mm-hmm.
where you were, I'm probably using the wrong term, but you were a sorority mom, house.
House. The formal title is house director.
Thank you. I knew I had an
But
outdated title.
yes.
But how, like, tell me
How did it
about that. Well,
happen?
I didn't even know that was like really a thing. Like, how did you know about it? What drew you to that? And what was your experience? You lived in the house, correct?
I lived in the house full time.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was the kids are calling them side quests
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
because
By the
that's
way,
what's
what a transition from like access to higher education to you
I
lived
know.
in the house. But
Yes.
so you had this side quest. Tell me everything about it.
So I just graduated from my master's, I believe, and I just started this new job. And one of my friends was the previous house director. I had no idea that this was a role or a thing that anyone did. I'd never considered it, but she said, me and my husband are kind of done with this. Are you interested in applying for this job? You would get to live in the house. So it's an apartment separate from the house. I'm not living with, a bunch of teenagers. I am, but I'm not.
No bunk beds. Yeah.
Yes. Um, Everything is included. So there's no bills, there's no mortgage, there's no rent. You eat the food. There's a chef that comes in every day. It sounds very fancy. And it was, but it's not as fancy as it sounds. And maybe that's just my privilege showing. I don't know. Um, but yeah, she was like, everything's included. You could do it for a year, and then, you could leave. It's basically just a glorified like facilities manager type role. You are the adult making sure that no one sets anything on fire. And if they do, making sure that somebody comes to fix that thing that got set on fire. And then it's also a lot of like managing contractors, managing like the folks that clean the house, the folks that cook, um, anything that happens like renovations, if something is broken. It's just like a facilities manager type role. Um, and I said, yeah, I'll do this for a year. And I ended up staying there for 6.
Amazing. That's a
So,
long time. And was this
yeah,
associated with the university or the sorority?
both. So the
Both.
house is university owned.
Okay.
And part of the sorority's contract with the university is that they have a house director. But I was paid by the sorority
The sorority.
itself.
That makes
Mhm.
sense. Like, what was one of the strangest or most interesting experiences that you had?
Yeah, honestly, the women that lived there during the year, so they were members of the sorority. They were there 9 months out of the year. And then we had these summer groups. the women that lived there had their kind of just like typical things that you would expect of college age students
Yeah.
to encounter.
Yeah.
But the summer groups were the ones that were interesting. And I hate to say it, but I think it's because they were co-ed, where they would
Interesting.
just get into wild trouble over
Yeah.
things. And it was
It's
just really,
summer, you're
yeah,
20, it's co-ed.
yes, it's summer, you're 20, it's co-ed. This is not your home institution.
Right.
So like the rules of conduct do not apply. And if they do, I am leaving on August 1st. So whatever happens here, I can forget about it because I'm, going to Nebraska or California or
Right.
wherever I go to school.
Right.
Um, yeah, they would be there was lots of video games in the living room from the men that lived in the house. And my room was also on that first floor. So I often found myself opening the door at 2 a.m. and being like, please go to bed. I
Yeah.
cannot do this anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think we forget how messy that entire age is and
Yeah.
how messy teenagers are and their frontal lobes aren't developed. And yeah,
Yeah.
the summer groups were probably more rambunctious. But during the year, it was like your typical, there's not supposed to be alcohol in the house. What is this? Make it
Right.
go away. I don't
Right.
want to have to write a report. Even as simple as like, Christal, I used my hair dryer in my room and I blew all the outlets on the third floor. Can you come fix it? And I'd be like, yes. Or honestly, this was pre-COVID, where I had
Wait,
one of
did
my,
you live there through COVID?
yes, that's
Oh,
actually
wow.
why I stayed. I
Oh,
was ready to go because I moved in 2016. So right around 2019, I was like, I've been here for 3 years. I think it's time. Like this apartment feels a little small, a little
yeah,
cramped.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And then COVID happened. And I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen with the world. This was not only was it no bills, none of your
Yeah.
typical bills. But I was getting a salary for being a house
Wow.
director. So I had my work salary,
Yeah.
that salary. I wasn't paying any bills and I was saving money. So I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And when they moved back in, we went from like 37 women to 16.
Wow.
So I was very scared there for a while. Because I thought for sure, especially in the beginning, I mean, they moved back in August 2020, and I thought
Wow.
they're all going to go partying. They're going to bring COVID back to the house. I'm going to get sick. Terrible things are going to happen. And unfortunately, during the summer that the house was alone, so like from March to August,
Mhm.
I did not see the young people in the college town being very responsible.
Got it.
I mean, it was April and they were having, parties in the college town. And I would take my dog on a walk and I'd see like, 20, 30 people in a backyard drinking or playing beer pong. And
Right. Business
I
as
was just
usual. Yeah,
nervous.
yeah.
Yeah, they weren't scared. And I guess I probably wasn't scared when I was 19 or
Mhm.
20. But that was my fear. And honestly, after we had those 16 women, I bonded with them in this very like weird, special way
Yeah.
where we were like trying to get through this together. And then they said, we're going to do another semester of only 16. And I said, cool, I'll stay another semester. And then I ended up staying until 2022, so
Wow.
summer of 2022. So 2 more years, but yeah, I was there through COVID, and I will say the thing that it was like a love-hate relationship with that kind of role because I was still working on campus. So my entire life was within this like 1 mile radius.
Yeah.
All of my friends worked on campus. I lived on campus. All of my favorite restaurants were like in walking distance. And I just never left. Like I never put any miles on my car.
Right.
I was in this little bubble. Um, and now that I've moved away from that, I've been very intentional about creating a home life and a work life and really setting some boundaries. But for those 6 years, it was really a time. And I really felt like I was part of the community and there was nowhere on that campus that I could walk where I didn't know anyone. In between my scholarship students, my other jobs, my friends on campus, I mean, I was meeting, 50, 60 new women every year that would come into the house, not to live there, but, for activities and things. And it was just really this like special, special place that I really hold dear in my heart.
It sounds like something out of a novel, you know? It sounds like this very romantic kind of experience that you had. I'm sure it wasn't romantic at like 2 in the morning when you're telling people to stop playing video games, but
Yeah.
and then during this time, you also found a lot of success in social media. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. Yes, it was really wild.
What
It
a
was,
time, Crystal. What a time of
I
your
know,
life.
it was maybe the end of April 2020, towards the beginning of May. I downloaded TikTok because I had just bought a new phone and I had all this space because I didn't have any apps. And I was like, let me download this TikTok. And so I take my camera and I walk around the house because the house is completely empty. And I was like, this is what I'm doing, like walking around this house by myself. And that video went viral, which I don't say this as like a humble brag, but now that I've gone viral a few times, it's not as scary. But that first time, I changed, like, I made all of my accounts private, like that. I privated my TikTok for a little while because at first it was really fun and people were like, oh, that's so cool, like what a cool job. And then every single time one of your videos gets a lot of views, it will slowly find its way to like the people that are just seeing your video because TikTok thinks it's popular and they're just going to try it out with a new demographic. And then those people were leaving comments like, you're alone in your house by yourself, like someone's going to come find you. And it was like, cool,
Cool, cool, cool.
great,
Yeah.
thanks. But it was really cool. And I was able to, like, now that I like look back, I don't really post on that account too much anymore, but now that I look back, it was really cool to like document my life in that way. And it would be silly things. I would never really know what people would like or wouldn't like, but it would be silly things from like, this is what the chef cooked today, or like, look at this. I mean, there was a video that I posted where one of the sewers backed up into our house, and that video got 1 million views. People were like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, how did that happen? And at one point, we had to get a like a ring cam type thing for the front of the house. Because we were experiencing some vandalism. And so I started like cropping the videos and posting some of the crazy, silly things that some of the members of the community would do in front of our house. And people loved that. Or, they would want to know how there were several people, which is really special to me, that I am friends with, not in real life, but that we message each other every once in a while because they became house directors seeing me on TikTok and now they're house directors, or people that will be like, I was so scared to join a sorority, but then I saw that like you were having such a great time and now I want to do it. Yeah, it was very romantic, I think. It was just like this fun thing and I got to document this really weird time in everyone's life. And it was great. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
it was almost like a little reality television show for people.
yeah.
You know, that's so cool. It's so, how cool is that that people you didn't know reached out and said, like, you inspired me to do this, or I was concerned about it and you gave me the strength or courage to do it. That's really special.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm just I mean, at what I stopped, but at one point I was like dancing on the internet, which like we're not going there anymore. We're
Yeah.
not doing that. But it's just like I was just making silly videos. I didn't think that they were that impactful. But yeah, I made a lot of real life friends that I haven't met in real life, but real life friends
Yeah.
from that journey.
You did all of that. And then you got a new job, which took you hundreds, thousands of miles away.
Mhm.
You moved, you bought a house, which is amazing.
Yeah.
You're doing something new. You have two dogs. That's like a lot of change in a really short amount of time, especially after COVID, which I think is just different. Like pre and post COVID is just different. How did you manage all of that change and what support systems did you find or did you build to help you navigate that?
It was a really hard decision
Mhm.
to move back home. It was scary and I didn't know what I was doing and I like that you said manage because I feel like I just got through it.
Yeah.
I made it through. And it was just kind of one of those things where like my professional life at this point was at a peak. I won two awards of like house director of the year and like professional job, like my 9 to 5, sorry.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know what to call it. I
Yeah.
won like an advisor of the year award and I had like 75,000 followers on TikTok and like I was living in the house and I was saving all this money because I was like, I don't know what I'm saving this money for, but I need to save this money. So it was
Yeah.
just like everything was going really well. When I first moved out there, I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anyone. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, this feels really good, but I think I'm just ready for something different.
Mm-hmm.
It looked really shiny, I think, from the outside. But then me personally, I was like, I just need something different.
Mm-hmm.
I need to like get away from the noise. I need to get away from all of these things. Like it felt like I was ending my time there on an exclamation point kind
That's
of
great.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I've accomplished all of these things here, and this will always be kind of like another place to call home. But I'm ready just to shift and change some of my priorities and to do something completely different. And when I moved, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. So my parents like helped me move, helped me pack a U-Haul and, drove hundreds of miles with at that point only had one dog, so Eva. They helped me pack up this like tiny apartment in the sorority house. And I just remember that first day of like coming into my parents' house and they had like the guest room and they had like a really cute like welcome home sign and they were so
Oh.
sweet and supportive. But just like laying in that bed and it was so quiet. It was
Yeah.
awful. It was just like, what have I done? I have no income. Like, I can't make my TikTok videos anymore because I don't like that's not my life anymore. Like, I left all my friends. My therapist is not licensed in the state, so I can't even talk to her about it.
Yeah.
Like, I can't have my comfort foods. Like, everything
Yeah.
is just gone. And over those like 4 months that I lived with them, it was just so healing
Mm.
to have them take care of me,
Oh, that's
where I was
wonderful.
like overextending myself in so many ways and doing so many things and putting a lot of energy out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, no, I don't want to wake up at 7 a.m. to have breakfast. I don't have a job. I want to lay in bed all day and be depressed. And my dad is like, we need to trim some bushes. Like, come outside and like, I'm gonna make you breakfast and like, let's go, work on the backyard. And it was
Yeah.
just this really nice, like coming home feeling. And I felt really, really privileged that I was able to do that because not everyone has that great relationship with their parents or their
Yeah.
parents don't have the ability to like house them and feed them for 4 months. And it just kind of like worked out and happened. And then 4 months in, I like this house came on the market and I was like, this is perfect. It's like enough land, but not too much land.
Mm.
It's one floor. I feel very strongly that we should not have stairs in homes, but we don't have to talk about that right now.
I would love to know more about that, but keep going.
Yes. Like it was just this like really cute 3 bed, 2 bath. And I was like, Mom, I don't know if I'm ready. My dad was out of town. So I was like, let's just go look at it. Like me and my mom came and looked at it and it has these beautiful like front facing windows that are just like floor to ceiling. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put in an offer and see what happens. And in October, I bought the house in September and then I waited a month because I did some painting, repairs,
Uh-huh.
things like that. And then in October, like by my birthday of that next year, like I was in a new house. I had a
Amazing.
new job. It was just like all just happened in this very seamless way. And it was so scary. But now I love my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved my life then. But I
Yeah.
just kind of had to like let it go. It was a lot of just trusting the process, even when I didn't know what the process was or what was
Mm-hmm.
happening or what was going to happen. Um, and I don't know, half the time I'm just like, I don't know how I got here, Megan. I just got lucky.
Well, I give yourself some
So
credit because what I'm hearing too is like you were open to it. One thing that you said about letting your parents just love you and care for you and feed you, and house you is like you were open to receiving that. And you didn't know what you were doing. You just knew you needed to change and you were open to receiving, open to that and trusting in yourself. Like give yourself credit for that. And it's even funny. I doubt you ever thought that was going to be your experience. I doubt you ever thought you were going to be in a sorority house director, but like that experience probably has helped you as a homeowner. I don't
Yeah.
know how to do anything in a house, like, so
Yeah.
the fact that you were like, oh, I had repairs and painting it, like you did all that before, so you not only were brave and courageous, but I think it's also that courage to just be open to see where life is going to take you and how the universe is going to get you to where you need to be.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It doesn't feel brave when you're doing it,
Yeah.
but
I mean, it
yeah.
is. It's I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. I have never lived outside of the United States and I've only moved one state. And, I speak the language. I know how to drive on highways. I know, like, all of
Yeah.
those sort of things. And it was so hard. Like, it's so hard. And making friends is hard. You're like,
Mhm.
middle-aged and you're like, oh, how do I make friends? Like, how do
Yeah.
I do this? Much less everything else that you're navigating. How has it been? You moved back to kind of where you grew up or where you had moved from before. How has that been in terms of, building a support system and
Yeah.
that you built boundaries between work and your personal life now? Do you find that you've been much more intentional since you've moved?
Yes, absolutely. And I do want to go back just slightly because you
Yeah.
asked about my support system,
Yeah.
and I will never stop bragging about the like women friends in my life,
Mhm.
where they just have loved me and accepted me and nurtured me in a way that I don't know. I sometimes feel undeserving of just like the wonderful friendships that I have because even though I wasn't near them, they were always checking on me and, FaceTiming and calling and just making sure, like, I had a friend come out for my first birthday, you know, in my new place because I was so scared and I was like, this is going to be really sad. I don't have any friends here. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, yes, my family's great. They're going to, buy a cake and do all those things. But I just want to grab a drink with like,
Yeah.
not my mom, you
Yeah.
know? And I think those things have kind of carried me through. I've had a lot of really strong female mentors. I've had a lot of really strong, bosses that were women that taught me a lot of things. Even in the sorority house, seeing those relationships and friendships and being able to be a woman in that space and being a role model to younger women. I think there's something very powerful and like sisterhoody about all of it. And so I have been able to keep a lot of those relationships that I had just, in a digital world. And I think
Mhm.
Zoom and FaceTimes and all those things make it easier. So I still have those things, but for probably the first year that I moved, I did not have any new friends. I had my coworkers, I had my dogs, and I had my parents and my sister. And it really isn't until now. I mean, I just celebrated 2 years of being here where I went to like a house party. It wasn't really a party,
Yeah.
but like a get together yesterday. I haven't been to like a new person's house in a very long time. And it was like a potluck. One of the women there was like, "We have a silent book club. Do you want to come? Like, let me get your number." And I'm like, "Yes."
Yes.
And here's the thing. I don't read and I don't know if I really want to go, but yeah, I just have to try it. Like I just
Yeah.
have to do it. So it is intentional, but it's also just let me do the scary thing and we're gonna see what happens. Might be good, might be bad. I don't know. Apparently silent book clubs are all the rage now. So
What is a silent book club?
great question. So you're not reading the same book. You just go to a restaurant or like a lounge type thing. You bring your book.
Uh-huh.
Everyone reads their book for an hour on their own, and then at the end of the hour, everyone wraps up, and you just like get drinks or
This is
like.
a dream.
uh,
This is a dream.
I
That's
know.
amazing.
I was like, yeah, I want to go to that. Um,
You can like get a book and just cut like an iPhone size like thing out of
yes,
it.
exactly. Everyone has their fancy books, and I don't know, bring like a People magazine or
I
something. I just want
I
to look at
love a
pictures.
magazine. I love a magazine. They're so great. I
Mhm.
know that's getting off topic, but how cool is that? I mean, so no
Yeah.
pressure. That's awesome.
Yeah, but it has taken me a while to be okay with being alone. And when I
Mhm.
say alone, I don't mean like alone. I mean, there was so much noise in my life,
Mhm.
even in my living space where there was never a quiet moment. There was always someone in the house. And if it wasn't the regular residents, it was the summer residents. And if it wasn't the summer residents, it was the maintenance man checking on like the ice machine. There was always a constant buzz. And I never really had to think about myself for very long because there was always something that came up. But I think this like last year and a half has just been discovering how to just be okay sitting on my couch with my dog watching TV. And that's okay. And that's normal and natural. And you don't need to be speaking to someone every second of the day. But yeah, I stay tuned. I plan on making many friends at this silent book club. So
That's great. And something that you said about, being okay with being alone, it really is a learned skill. And I
mm,
think, I hope everybody learns to do that. I know for me, when I got divorced, I remember being like, oh, now what? And constantly
mm,
having to keep myself busy, constantly having a podcast or the TV on. And this was also during COVID. So, it was an unhinged time anyway. But
yeah.
um, one of the things that has brought, and I always thought I was like okay with being alone. Like one of the things that I'm really comfortable, like one of my favorite things I should say is going to the movies by myself. Like one of my top five
Yeah.
favorite things to do. But it's very different when it's, a Wednesday at 5:30, and that's a very different experience. And one of the
Mm,
things that I found is I cherish it so much more now. Like
mm,
there are times when I'm like, no, I just want to be by myself. That's a skill that I don't know if you would agree with this, but I had to learn it. I
mm,
was never taught that. And I think it's probably just because of how life generally is. I had siblings, I was always going to this, and this.
mm,
And then right after college, I got married and I had kids, and it was,
mm,
like you said, like always noise. And when you cut out that noise, it's just you and your thoughts. That's it. That's all that's
mm.
there. So
Yeah, I think I credit a lot of it to my therapist. I
yeah,
really do. Because I was the person in college who would wait until the very end of the day until my best friend had gotten out of all her classes because I didn't want to go to Walmart by myself to buy, a bottle of ketchup.
yeah,
I could not do anything by myself. And I, fortunately and unfortunately, always found a person to sort of
yeah,
cling to. 9 times out of 10, those people were wonderful people who were happy to have me along. So it's fine. But yeah, I think it really takes time to develop the ability to just sit with yourself and be
yeah.
okay with yourself. It's a learned skill for
Yeah.
sure.
I could talk to you for hours and hours, I feel like. Okay, I do have to find out, why do you think houses should not have stairs? I'm very curious about this.
Because I think that one floor always gets neglected.
Interesting.
Mhm. I think that if you have an upstairs and your bedrooms are upstairs, everyone goes upstairs to their bedrooms and like hides, and then the main floor gets neglected. Or if you have a
Interesting.
really fancy basement, everyone's like hiding in the basement. And I just like being able to walk through my house and know that I'm using every
All
space.
of the space. Yeah, that's such a good
Yes.
feeling. I thought it was going to
Yeah.
be, my kids and I are watching House Hunters International right now. And one of the things that I always comment on when it's like a walk up, I'm like, think about the groceries. You got to think about the
Yeah.
groceries on the
Oh my
stairs. So
goodness.
that's where I thought you were going. It's actually why we have one TV in my house, because I'm like, otherwise it's too easy to
Right.
escape and not be
Yeah.
together. And we have to negotiate what we're watching and when
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really interesting
Yeah.
take. I'm in a one, I used to live in DC and it was a condo, so that was easy, right? And now I'm in a
Mhm.
one floor, like a ranch style house,
Mhm.
and the cleaning is so much easier too, which is
Yeah.
a
You
plus.
don't have to take laundry up and downstairs either.
No, no. But then some people have houses where it's like they've got this cool laundry system and chutes and like all
Oh,
kinds of stuff. So anyway, three things that I ask everyone. What is what do you love most about what you do? And it could be about your life right now, not even
yeah.
professionally, just
Well, I think there's something really fun about my job where when I meet a student for the first time, I am reading their application. They're like not a real human. They're this human who I imagine in my head, kind of like the first time you read a book. It's this person who you imagine in your head, and you make them up, and you say they have these accolades, and they, won this thing, and they have these really great grades, or they have this, or they've told me this really great story in the essay, and I make up this person in my mind. And then I do my best not to get attached to anyone, because they're going to break your heart. They're going to go to Harvard, and then you're going to be sad about it. So I kind of just like put it out of my mind. And then that first day of fall classes where I physically have them on campus and I know they're not going anywhere, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the girl who was knitting sweaters for kittens at the animal shelter. And they're always just so surprised, where they're like, how do you remember that? And I'm like, I looked at your application for 6 months. I watched all your interviews. I read every single piece of feedback that was given about you. And I think that's just so fun and so cool every single year, where I make up these little like Sims in my
Yeah,
head,
like
and then
Avatar, yeah.
yeah, and then they appear in front of me, and I love that.
And then they grow into real people. Like, it's
Yeah,
so cool to see them become adults.
yeah. Many of my students from, I mean, I've gone to like student weddings. A lot of my students are having babies now. Like, they have these really cool jobs. It's just really fun to be like a very small part of that journey. And it's also really fun when they remember you, or they're like, oh my gosh, I remember when blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't think that you cared about that, but that's really cool. So that's why I love college students, is they have no idea what's about to happen to them between freshman year and senior year, and they're just completely different people. And I can't tell them about it. They just have to go through it. Yeah. And then when they graduate, I'm like, remember when you tried to drop out sophomore year and I told you not to, and look at you now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I
You're
love
like,
most
remember
about
I
my
went
job.
camping for you?
Yeah. Yeah, slept in a tent with a bunch of students, not with a bunch of students, but
Yeah.
near a bunch of students. And
Yeah.
yeah.
You are dedicated to your job. What?
Yeah.
This is a loaded question given everything that we've talked about,
Yeah.
but what advice would you give to your younger self?
Mhm. It's very cheesy,
Mm-hmm.
but I say it to my students all the time. You have to dig up the dirt before you can plant new flowers.
Love that.
That is one of the things. Everything is going to get so messy, and then it's going to get better, but like let it get messy. And I say this to myself too currently. Things are going to get messy. That's okay. And the other thing is, you can do everything exactly right. I work with very high achieving students. You can do everything exactly right, and something bad could still happen, and
Mhm.
that's okay. Like, just be okay with it. And they're like, I can't, I'm applying to 13 different Fulbright scholarships next week. And I'm like, cool, but like,
Yeah.
it's going to be fine. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself, is just, it's going to be okay. It's going to be messy, but you're going to be fine.
That's actually one of the
Yeah.
reasons I wanted to start this podcast, is because I think we see
Mm-hmm.
the, not necessarily the end result, but the what we put on social media and the pieces of people's lives, which are amazing. And it's almost like an Olympic athlete. You know, you watch Simone Biles and she's just unbelievable and makes it look so easy, but we haven't seen all the practices and how she eats and how her training schedule and all of that sort of thing. And life is messy, right? Like, we learn more many times from our failures than our successes, and life is messy, and but we can't get to that
Mm-hmm.
shiny place if we don't, like you said, get through the
Yeah.
mess and dig it up.
If I
So
could just add
yeah,
one more piece of advice,
please.
that I recently heard last year. Someone was giving a speech and was talking about a similar thing. And she said, don't try to get the shiny things, try to be the shiny thing. And I love that so much. I like wrote it down, and I like think about it at work all the time. But that's also, when you said shiny and bright, I was like, that, yeah, those awards and things are great, but also focus on yourself sometimes, and try to be the shiny thing. So
Yeah. And
that's it.
actually, this may not be the right connection, but I'm thinking about what we said about being alone and how it's a
Mm,
learned skill.
yeah.
And at least in my life, I won't speak for anybody else, but I was always taught it's about achievement, right?
Mm,
So you're going after
mhm,
the shiny things, you're acquiring the shiny things, you're on this track. And
mhm,
when you stop making that your focus, the only thing you really have is yourself.
Mhm.
And that's when I learned that to live in that silence,
Yeah.
and you're enough and how to be alone. That's
Yeah.
you just did that for me, Crystal. Thank you so much. Just
Yeah.
take that to therapy next week.
Mhm.
And then how can people find you if you want people to find
Yeah.
you?
So I am still active on my Instagram, which is at Uncut Crystal, and that's Crystal spelled Christal. And yes, I had just seen Uncut Gems when I came up
Hmm.
with that name, and I just thought it was so cute. So I have both Uncut Crystal on TikTok and Uncut Crystal on Instagram. I do have an Etsy shop where I make some fun stickers. It's kind of just like my little creative outlet. I'm currently expanding on it, but I just make stickers that relate to my life basically, and just hope that somebody else relates to them too. Um, some of them are like first generation college students. I just fulfilled an order for first generation college graduate stickers. Somebody ordered 100 for a med school graduation, and I was
How
just so excited about
cool.
that. Yeah, so that's where you can find me.
It's a good place, I think, for me to stop peppering you with
Yeah,
questions. Thank you so much for being here. You were such a joy. I'm so proud of you.
thank
And
you.
I look forward to seeing your continued success personally and professionally.
Yeah, thank you, Megan.
Crystal and I had an interesting conversation within her career path about first generation students, TRIO programs, scholarships, need based, merit based, affirmative action, philanthropy. I cut it out because of time. If you are interested in hearing that portion of the conversation, stay after the ending credits. If not, I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Wait, What Do You Do Again? For more information about today's guest, or if you'd like to be on the show, please visit megdeford.com. See you next time. Can you define trio and first gen just in case people aren't familiar with those terms?
Yes, so there's lots of different definitions for first gen, so I'm glad you asked. But typically, we are talking about students whose parents do not have any degree in the US. Sometimes you won't hear that in the US part, but 9 times out of 10, it's students who are navigating. They're the first people in their family to navigate the college admissions process, the actual college process, and typically they're the first student in their family to graduate from college. And we don't consider like siblings or cousins or anyone
Mhm.
else in the family. It's really just if the parent has gone to a
Right.
college or university in the US.
Yeah. And I imagine even though it's probably a very different process internationally, it's still different being the first
Yes.
versus the first in the United States.
For sure. Our education system looks wildly different than it does in other countries. So
Yeah.
it's difficult to navigate when you don't have, we like to call it social capital. So you don't
Yeah.
have those systems or those people in place that are telling you, this is how you do this, and this is how you do that, and this is what a bursar is, and this is what the registrar does. I think we often forget, just because we're so ingrained in it, how much of this language is not language that we use in everyday life. And so it's very difficult for students to navigate that if they don't have anyone to help them.
And then what is a
Uh,
trio program?
TRIO programs are federally funded programs that there's different levels. So there's TRIO programs that specifically help students that are first generation and low income get into college. And then there are TRIO programs that help students when they are in college. And then there's TRIO programs that help students for grad school. But the long story short is they are federally funded programs that help low income and first generation students, and they are typically housed within like high schools or colleges. And so the college will typically provide some funding, the federal government provides some funding, and the goal is to get more first gen and low income students to graduate with college degrees.
Yeah. And so like why does that from your perspective, why does that matter? Why does it matter for low income or first gen students to earn a bachelor's degree?
the reason why it's important is because the problems that we are increasingly facing are very multifaceted. And when you don't have all of the voices represented in the different rooms, where everything from like engineering to, literature to obviously politics, you need to have different voices in those rooms with that knowledge to bring perspectives that wouldn't otherwise be heard. Especially when we're talking, I think you get to certain levels in life that you kind of disconnect from perspectives that are not your own, and you really have to seek those out. So I think the more that we try to fight for this different diversity of voices in these different spaces, the better we'll be in society. And so on top of that, typically a college degree, earning wise, will get you so much further these days than it did before. And you're really, when a first gen student graduates from college, they're really bringing up an entire community. They're bringing up their family, their siblings, their cousins, their, whoever it is with them. And so it's a really life-changing thing for them. But again, it's also really important that we fight to have all different kinds of voices in our communities.
My brother was the first one in our family to go to college, and we were raised by a single mom, fairly low income. I mean, I hesitate to say that because we always had food on the table and things like
Yeah.
that. But there were years there where I know it was financially a real struggle for her and for us before things sort of stabilized. And it completely changed the trajectory of our family. She cleaned houses on the weekends to make
Mhm.
ends meet, which is amazing. And she's a hard worker, and certainly instilled that work ethic into us. But
Mhm.
she had to, because like what you were saying, she didn't have a degree. There was only so far she could go in her career and where she was.
Yeah.
And it really can change someone's life, much less, like you said, making sure that we are represented fully in our industries. I'm not a cynical person, but every time I see like, oh, this is the first woman that graduated from this PhD program, or first Black engineering PhD student from a major public institution, I'm like, that's awesome, but it's also kind of sad. Like, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
We're in 2024 and it's
What took
the
so long?
first. Yeah, like, and kudos to that student, not taking away anything from that. But I think we sometimes forget, like, we're not as diverse in all areas of our lives and industries and just world that we navigate, that we think. And having those perspectives are hugely important. Have you, in your time, especially as you're talking about need-based aid versus merit scholarships, or need scholarships versus merit scholarships, have you seen a change the amount of scholarships for either, or even the conversation around scholarships, with conversations around affirmative action and some of the changes that have taken place there, especially recently?
Mhm.
What changes have you maybe seen or encountered? And how, especially at a public institution, it's very different, right? Like, private
Mhm.
institutions aren't beholden to the same sort of restrictions that
Mhm.
public institutions have. What have you seen, and how are you dealing with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. This, because it is so new, I think that a lot of what's happening, not just in the scholarship world, but in the admissions world, is, for lack of a better way to put it, is everyone is just so cautious because they're so afraid of legal action of any
Yeah.
sort. So I think we've kind of really taken a huge step back from obviously looking at race and admissions, looking at race and scholarship programs, even smaller things where we didn't we never considered that it might be a problem that we have a specific organization for Black students on campus. Is it going to be a problem? How we don't know the reach yet. We don't know the impact yet of the Supreme Court decision. So in the scholarship world, I'll say that this year we're just doing our best, and making the best decisions that we can.
Yeah.
Pause. I don't know like how much I can
Yeah,
Tough
yeah,
love, you know.
absolutely. Yeah, I will say
But
even from the other side, from my side of the world that I've worked in most of my career is the philanthropic side. I mean, we're dealing with the same thing. And, what can we take? How much can we take? Are we going to have to return this gift? Even to the other extreme of individuals who are like, I don't want to give to anything because they don't believe in it,
mm,
which is their prerogative. I mean, you don't have to give to anything, but it's it is very new and it's an interesting world out there. So it'll be curious to watch and to see, how donors certainly react to
yeah.
things and if there's almost an increase in certain giving because they see a need there,
Mhm.
or will the gifts be allowed to be used in the
Yeah.
way that they want it to be. But so that's certainly fun for you to
Yeah.
manage and
Well,
negotiate.
I will also say that because of the Supreme Court decision, we have seen a really big shift towards first gen low income students. So I think that is what the direction that we're going in, where it's not necessarily about race, but
Hmm.
it will be about getting some of these students from underrepresented states, counties, like finding diversity in other ways. And again, I'm really seeing a big push in the what are the first gen students doing? How do we get more of them? What are the low income students doing? So it's kind of a strange silver lining,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
some ways.
yeah.
But I definitely think that that's going to be the direction that I think a lot of colleges are going is let's redefine diversity and let's figure out what
Right,
it means
right.
and how do we come at this from a different angle.
Right, which I think is a useful exercise, frankly. Overall, it
Mhm.
is an interesting silver lining. And then the question that I have that we're not going to solve today is, well, how are we support if we care about it at a university and especially at a
Mhm.
public university setting, how are we supporting students prior to getting to the application process? So are we really serving more students or is it just becoming harder for universities to find these students? So I don't know. That's a whole other thing that we don't have to get into that right now, but it's interesting to kind of see we're trying to help students and to have access to higher ed.
Mhm.
Um, but what are we doing prior to that? And is it
Mhm.
even a university's role? It's really the state's role in many ways and a federal role, to get more
Yeah.
students to the point of application and to get them
Yeah.
in, and prepare them in that way.